Will the Falcons be forced to take an edge rusher in the first round?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew, aka Sirius Black, aka the Jolly Green Giant, aka the Iron that sharpens the iron, aka Mr. aka, and I appreciate each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this illustrious podcast that makes it your first listen, first watch of the day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer subscriber, follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, I will be joined by Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports to talk about what are the Falcons round one options. We'll talk about maybe some day two targets and positions of need and all that stuff. So without further ado, let's start that conversation with Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports right now. Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, joined by another illustrious guest. He is Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports and the Exemplist podcast. And of course, he is joining us to talk about what the Falcons are going to do in the draft. And Charles, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I feel like this maybe is one of the more positive times, optimistic times in which we've recorded a podcast in several years, I would say.
It's been a while.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Because usually it's just like, damn, we gonna see some touchdowns from this Arthur Smith offense, or we're losing Ryan Nielsen, but hey, we got a quarterback again. So I think it's fair to have some expectations for what can happen, which is only a bad thing as we know.
Yes, very much so. So speaking of expectations, let's talk about what the Falcons are going to do in the first round of the draft. And Charles, I'm curious to pick your brain on this. Like I sit here and I go, we can talk about alternative options for the Falcons, but like when I look at this draft class and I say like the Falcons need an edge rusher, they need someone that can bring some juice. There's 3 good edge rushers in this draft class, and then after that, it's like, and so. Is this Falcon team a deeply unserious football team if they do not take an edge rusher in round 1?
Well, will the pass rush suck? Probably, but
that's nothing new, right?
That's nothing new. I mean, it will probably suck with the rookie with there too. Let's be real. It's a long-term play. I don't think they have to go edge in round 1, or they would be a super unserious team if they decided to go in a different direction. Because look, if depending on how the board stacks, and who is available at 8, if the Falcons are going to go and stick with this best player available strategy, I think it's much easier to say that with this specific draft class that the best player available at 8th overall will probably not be an edge rusher. It just kind of depends how you feel about these prospects. Depending on who your edge one is, whether it's Dallas Turner or Latu or Chop Robinson. I don't view any of those guys as good of a prospect as like Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt or a tackle or something like that. So that you can confidently say Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, I would say, are probably locks to go before the Falcons pick. So you're going to have someone that's pretty good fall down to the 8th pick. That might not be an edge rusher. Now, is an edge rusher something they need? Obviously. I mean, this is the Atlanta Falcons. Of course they need an edge rusher. But if you are sitting there at 8 and like Rome Odunze is on the board, it would be hard for me to pull the trigger on Dallas Turner over Odunze because I just think Rome's a better player than him, and they're kind of still at the point in their roster building where they just need to be stacking talent. And based on their wide receiver situation, based on like the long-term contracts they have over there, I don't think that that's even necessarily a bad idea.
Okay. I think it's fair. The wide receivers, whether it's Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, are the two players that the Falcons could take at 8 that would be like, okay, I get it.
Right? I get it. Yeah.
I guess if it's not one of those guys, could you justify another pick like a corner at 8?
I think just based on profiles, like Quinyon Mitchell will probably be the guy that I would take at 8. But even then, like I'd be trying to see if I could trade down to like, if the Broncos or the Raiders are trying to get up for a quarterback that falls in the top 10, I would probably try to trade down first. But I also kind of feel that way about Dallas Turner. But with Dallas Turner, the pass rusher from Alabama, for people who aren't familiar, I think his tape is like good enough like to be a first round prospect. But what's probably more exciting is just like the profile, because you have 245 pound, 250 pound edge rusher that's not getting blown off the ball like we have seen from other Falcons edge rushers in that weight range. But it's also 21 with like 4.4 speed. Those profiles tend to become productive NFL players unless they get drafted by Atlanta, in which case you're a flash in the pan and nothing ever happens again twice. But it just, to me, I think that this pick is really interesting for them because it's kind of Terry's first hard decision of his drafting career, where he's going to have to say best player available or super hardcore position need. Because I think with the Falcons wide receiver room, they could definitely get by with what they have. And then especially if you add someone on day 2, like that's probably a pretty good wide receiver room. It kind of gets harder at like cornerback across from AJ or edge rusher because they don't really have anybody for the long term there, unless Ebiketie gets like unless he takes a step this year, which I kind of think is somewhat possible. But still, you probably need to think about the caliber of player you're drafting at 8, and if it's not a defensive player, I don't think that's the end of the world. Although I understand why people are a little antsy about it because they had such a light free agency period on defense this year.
Still plenty to come on today's Locked On Falcons with Charles McDonald of Yahoo Sports, including how do the Falcons maximize this pick and whether that includes the possibility of trading back in round 1 or potentially taking a swing on the quarterback. Guys, passion, drive, patience. This is the winning formula if you want to win championships as well as keep your number 1 ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance like we're hoping to see from the Falcons pass rush. And whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, or more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Speed, power, style. That feels like Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, and Laiatu. But with over 122 million parts for your number 1 rider, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car an MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. Yeah, I think for me, it boils down to when I look at, I kind of see edge, corner, and wide receiver as kind of the top 3 needs. And I think this draft really kind of sets up for the Falcons to attack those with their top 3 picks. And for me, when I look at the top 3 edges, I like all of those guys, to varying degrees, but all of those guys are good. And then the drop off to me after that point to the guys that are going to probably be there on day 2, like, I don't know if you're getting guys that are significantly better than Lorenzo Carter or D'Angelo Malone. And meanwhile, I look at corner and wide receiver, and it's like there's like 20 good wide receivers in this draft class. So you can theoretically wait till round 4 and still get a guy that can add value. And with the corners, and again, I haven't done a deep dive on this cornerback class, but like I've watched some of the guys that are projected to go in round 2, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't see a massive drop off between those guys and guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold in terms of their film. So that's kind of where I'm looking at it, where it's just like, if you're trying to maximize each pick, it seems like edge makes the most sense in round 1.
Yeah.
That after that point, you're just kind of punting on the position after that point. But
yeah, I would say I think you make some good points. Like if you're living in a world where you're at 8 and you feel like, when you come into a draft board and you're building out, all right, here are the players that we think are the elite players in this class. And obviously the Falcons will be drafting a quarterback at 8. So like the elite non-quarterbacks, if none of those guys are on the board at 8 for you, I would probably force the edge rusher pick. Just say, hey, Dallas, we're going to figure this out because you got the tools to be something pretty special, or at least like, I would say, I think Dallas is probably close to like a 9 to 11 sack guy in the NFL, which is something the Falcons don't have. So, hey, beggars can't be choosers. But for me to take that edge rusher at 8 in this year's class, I would have to feel pretty comfortable that all the players we have graded as elite players are off the board.
Okay. Well, I think that makes sense. And if an elite player is there, if you're not comfortable taking them, that's the scenario where you talk about, because I feel like if the Falcons going to be able to move back, it's going to be because one of those wide receivers is there. That's kind of how I feel. I'm just curious, sort of what to you is the scenario where the Falcons have a realistic shot of trading back.
I think it's tough. Like if JJ McCarthy falls, or or if any one of the non-killed quarterbacks falls to 8, that's probably what you're looking at. Or if there's a run on quarterbacks and wide receivers, and like Joe Alt is still there at pick 8, if he gets past Tennessee somehow, that's probably a spot you're looking at. But I think with how this draft is shaping out the top, it would probably be a wide receiver, because I think Olufashanu is great. I'm thinking a lot higher on him than other draft guard, but I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense for the Falcons right now. You can probably squeeze a little more juice out of that pick. I really think that one of their best options might be to trade back if one of those quarterbacks fall. Shoot, maybe even take a quarterback.
Well, that was going to be my follow-up question. I have a hard time seeing one of the quarterbacks fall in there, but for you, I did a podcast like earlier this offseason where it's just like talking about those top 3 teams, and it's like they're going to take quarterbacks because like they don't really have an opportunity to, I know New England is bad, but like it's hard to pass on a quarterback when you're in that position. And I'm wondering, does the same logic apply to the Atlanta Falcons, even though you have 100 million reasons, so to speak, why you wouldn't necessarily use your top pick on a quarterback? What for you, if Drake May is there, if JJ McCarthy, it doesn't seem like Jaden Daniels is going to be there, but for you, is it either one of those guys at 8, you're taking them, or is this you're only on like one of those guys' bandwagons?
It's only Drake for me. I don't really get the JJ McCarthy stuff. I don't think he's bad, but like I just don't see enough that would excite me where I was like, oh, I got to get this guy. I got to trade 3 first-round picks to get this guy. Oh, if Drake May falls to 8, if I'm running the team, we're sprinting to the podium to get that pick in. And I think the Kirk Cousins thing will work out. And look, the Kirk that played last year, totally worth that deal that he got from Atlanta. He was honestly playing like one of the better, non-Mahomes, non-Jackson, non-Allen quarterbacks in the league up until he got hurt. And I think that's even reflected in like some of the more advanced stats where he's placed in like top 5 in terms of like success rate and EPA for last year. But there's always he tore his Achilles. He's 35. there's a world where this doesn't work out. And even if it doesn't work out, this is a short-term play. This is not a long-term play. So like if Drake May falls to 8, I don't know what Terry's job security is looking like, where he can make that pick and have him sit for 2 years before you can start thinking about getting rid of the Kirk Cousins deal. But in terms of just like having a long-term franchise quarterback prospect, I think he's really good. Like, I don't think he's that far off from Caleb. I have Caleb 1, Drake 2, and the rest I'm like, I don't really see these guys as can't miss.
Okay. Yeah, I see it similarly. But let's imagine the Falcons don't take that quarterback at 8.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one of these sort of second tier, third tier guys, whatever you want to call them, that you sort of say, hey, I'm willing to take a flyer on that guy on day 2 or maybe even day 3?
No, not really. No, to be like, maybe like depending on where you're at in, like, if you want to burn your second round 3 pick on like Spencer Rattler, I think I'd be okay with that. But I've seen people talk about, drafting Michael Penix in the second round if he's there. I don't know. I think there's just too many concerns there with the injuries. Quite honestly, like when I watch the Washington offense, I come away more impressed with their wide receivers than the quarterback. So no, to me, it's like if Drake May falls to 8, pull the trigger. Other than that, you can keep the rest of you guys.
All right, there's still more to come on today's Locked On Falcons with Charles McDonald discussing other positions of need, including why defensive tackle might be a dark horse pick for the Falcons in round 1. Any other positions that you look at? Like I talked last week about safety and how I think the Falcons could definitely use an upgrade at the starter spot, but it doesn't seem like, given the narrative around this draft class, is not a particularly strong safety class. Do you feel like that's a position that the Falcons maybe should force it, or maybe you don't necessarily feel like that's a force? What are your thoughts on that need?
Shoot, I mean, force it with what? Like, that's like you start running through these safeties in draft. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it seems like they like the USC safety. He's fine. I tend to like, there's this Wake Forest safety, Malik Mustafa, that I kind of like. But even him, I don't think he's like, probably like a 3rd round or maybe even a 4th round guy. I think they need to try and find an upgrade next to Jesse Bates, but I don't know if this draft actually has one. I still think you should take the dart throw just for the competition, just for the depth. That's never a bad thing to have. But I don't think people who are looking for, an upgrade at that spot, I don't think you're going to find it in this draft.
Okay, that's fair. Last question I have for you. Grady Jarrett's not getting younger. David Onyemata's not getting younger. Do you think getting another body on that interior D line
crucial?
Okay. So
huge need. Like, I don't know if people are really talking about it, but I think that's a pretty big need. And at this point, Grady coming off an ACL tear, I don't know if you can confidently project like what next season's going to look like for him. But obviously, like, he's in this era, he might be the best Falcons defender of the past 20 years, most consistent that you can say. But they do probably need to add another body, and I do think that round 2 would be a sweet spot to add someone like that. I don't really know if 8 is where you would take a Johnny Newton or a Byron Murphy, but in the second round where, maybe looking at more guys like Mason Smith from LSU, Mekhi Wingo also from LSU, that's probably another spot, or, a better spot where you can add someone. Cause I wish there was like another guy that had like real pass rush, like 3 technique ability, kind of like Johnny Newton does projects to be at the top of the class. But I do think the defensive tackle class kind of got undersold a little bit. I think there's some good talent to find on day 2 and even day 3.
Okay. Well, I guess my last question is, what do you think of the idea of, if the Falcons trade back, maybe taking a player like Byron Murphy in the middle of the first, you plug him in at nose tackle where he played a lot of snaps at Texas. And so you can have your 3-man line of him, Onyemata, and Grady Jarrett. And then obviously when the time comes, when you need to move off of either one of those older veteran guys, you have your sort of 3 technique difference maker on the interior. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I like that idea a lot. Honestly, I would like I could understand the rationale if they picked a defensive tackle at 8. Like I could actually understand that. Now, like with Murphy or Newton, I kind of think with them you can well, I what I like about like the idea of, you know, Grady, Onyemata plus Murphy or Newton is I feel like all 3 can kind of play either spot in a pinch. The best long-term position for Murphy and Newton is definitely 3 technique, where they can use that ability to get up the field and see more one-on-one blocks than a 1 technique does. But still, you know, Grady's good at that too. Onyemata has his flashes there as well. So I think that's kind of a good situation because it gives you a lot of flexibility up front that they might not have had last year, especially once Grady got hurt. And like you said before, they need youth and they need another good body on the interior. And I think, you know, we've seen over Grady's career how important it is to have a stud on the defensive line, especially when you can't find anyone else to play with him. So let's get Johnny Newton and Byron Murphy on the Grady Jarrett Babineau plan. You know, disruptive guy that has to do all the heavy lifting by himself.
There you go. Yeah. Byron Murphy out of Texas, Johnny Newton out of Illinois, for those of you not as familiar with the draft, because we have really not spent really that much time talking about D tackles on this podcast. So appreciate you, Charles, for coming in, sharing your insights. We'll see what the Falcons do. Let the people know, you know, what are you up to in the next 2 weeks between now and the draft over at
we're about to drop, me and my coworker Charles Robinson, we are about to drop the All Juice team, which we work on every year in honor of our former colleague, passed away, Therese Paler. You know, we basically just go through the entire draft from first round through UDFA and build a team of 23 players. And we have a scholarship that's attached to Howard University, Mizzou, where Therese went to school, and you should definitely check all that stuff out. It's called the All Juice Team. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts, writing basically every day up until the draft. Podcast, The Exempt List, you can find it on the Zero Blitz podcast feed on, you know, Apple and Spotify. And yeah, so I just got to grind through the next, let's call it 17 days, and greener pastures are coming.
Okay. All right. Well, Charles, I always appreciate your work. I always appreciate your insight. Every time I see you, and I'm like, that guy got his start here on the Falcons, right? So, you know, I made him. All right.
That's right. That's right. The Aaron Freeman coaching tree.
Well, man, I appreciate you.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, guys. Thanks to Charles McDonald for joining us on today's episode. And our next episode will be, at least in theory, assuming the Falcons don't do anything crazy this weekend, will be Sunday night here on YouTube, Monday morning on your preferred audio platform. And it will, of course, be a mock draft Monday. And currently my plan is, and we'll see if this changes in the next couple of days, but my plan is to do my own 3-round mock draft where I'll break down each of the Falcons' top 4 selections in the first 3 rounds, or possibly more for a trade back scenario. And I'll be making every pick for all 32 NFL teams, but obviously our analysis will be focused on who the Falcons wind up taking on that one. So that's in store for you as your next first listen on Monday morning, I guess you could say. And of course, you know, that will kick off another week of great content here, illustrious content, you might say, here on this illustrious podcast. And we'll have some more great guests. And hopefully, you know, we'll, at some point, I'm still working out the details and trying to, you know, schedule these episodes. But I'm hoping that as we creep closer to the draft, because, you know, in theory, not a whole lot is going on from a team standpoint in these last 2 weeks. It's just kind of, we just sit there and wait for the draft to come, the 2 longest weeks of the year. But I do want to get some guests on that will do some more in-depth positional breakdowns where we can go through each position group, like corner, like wide receiver, quarterback, edge, etc. and talk about some of the top prospects that, maybe on the Falcons radar on day 1, day 2, day 3, that sort of thing. So that may also be in store for you starting next week or the week thereafter. So that is going to do it for us here, guys. We'll give one last plug to this illustrious podcast, which is make sure you subscribe, right? We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers between now and the draft. Analytics tell me that 48% of the people currently listening to me talk right now or watching me talk right now are not subscribed to the podcast here on YouTube. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, all that and more, so that you show yourself to be one of our illustrious listeners here on the Locked On Falcons podcast. And last plug, after your first listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, Locked On Sports Atlanta as your second listens of day. Of course, we're talking 4-letter networks, and you may be tired of all the other 4-letter networks, but I got a brand new one for you guys. That's the LOPN, the Locked On Podcast Network, where Locked On Sports Today is free 24/7 streaming channel, giving you the biggest stories from all the leagues across the globe. And if you're looking for more local flavor, Locked On Sports Atlanta is giving you the same 24/7 streaming here on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And even Michael Penix, there's a lot of injury concerns there. I think there's concerns with the way Washington ran their offense. That's not really a sure thing either. Uh-oh.